Good morning. Good morning, BrewSports Basketball. Yeah. Hey, look, it's Tuesday, January 17th. For those of you that need to know that, we are currently 2 days into, this will be the day 2 of our basketball week. And we are currently in the 14th period. So 14th week of the season, which means we're over the halfway point by a lot. So now is the time to really start thinking about making those trades. What are you going to do to set yourself up for success for this season or for next season? And if you're not thinking about those things, well, then shame on you, because you should be strategically looking for ways to improve your team from here on out. And it's really two directions. It's either this season or next season. A reminder that the bottom 8 teams, so the losers in the first round of the playoffs, as well as the toilet bowl participants, all get lottery tickets for a chance at the number 1 overall pick. Just want you to keep that in mind. Current seeding. Let's talk about that. The 4 teams that are currently sitting on the outside looking in, and we have no ties this time for 8th seed or better. So our currently our toilet bowl teams are. Let me share my screen with you real quick. When we look at this, we have in 9th, we have Merrifield. Merrifield continues to slip. Look at that. That is his 3rd week in a row being swept. He's also put up a really low number pretty much every week in the last 3 weeks. Then we have Matt, who's actually kind of coming back. Look, his roster is decent. It's just not healthy. That's the problem with Matt's team right now. He gets that health going, and he could make a run at Dana for the 8th seed, Dana or Andrew. Currently in 10th place is Eric, and he's coming off of actually coming off of a big win against division rival Lance. Unfortunately, Lance also won his other game, so that put him in a really good position. Excuse me. And then Chris is currently sitting with the worst record in the league at 7-19, but he also plays in a division where everybody else is 500 or above. So now the playoff seeding, we sitting at number 8. We have Dana at 11-15. He's coming off of a split. At number 7, we have Andrew, who's coming off of a big sweep this week, and he's 12-14 on the season, closing in on 500. They're tied for 5th and 6th is we have Aaron and we have Swenson. And then in 4th, we have Elmer, who drops a game. And this is a big one. Drops not only a game to Mason, but drops a game against Mason to Mason. So that's a big loss for Elmer and his chances to get into the division, to be the division leader. When we look at the division leaders, we're looking at Lance in the number 3 seed. Certainly the number 3 seed is not indicative of his performance, but he is the highest scoring team in his division. So he's got that going for him, which is nice. Name the movie reference. What do you got? All right. In the 2nd seed, we have Nasty Nikes. That's Josh Dobson, who has opened up the largest lead in the league on 2nd place. He currently has a 6-game lead over Swenson and Aaron. And that might hold at this point. You have to think that these 3 teams are pretty equal in roster makeup. So that 6 games might hold. It's going to be dependent on who is the most active at the trade deadline and what their motivation is. And then finally, the number 1 seed is Mason at 23-3. The irony is that he hasn't clinched because it's still too early. We're still sitting 8 weeks away from the end of the season, but he's close. He's actually a lot closer than you think. If you think 8 weeks, that's 16 games. And if you look at where he is versus number 9, he's currently 13 games up on number 9. He can clinch a postseason berth this week. He sweeps and Merrifield is swept. Then Mason is in the playoffs. And that's the earliest we've, I think, ever had anybody clinch a playoff spot. I'll have to get on our crack research team to figure that out. I talked in the beginning about trades because we need some action. We had a little bit of activity on Saturday, which is great when Andrew and Matt put together a trade that had been in the works for a couple of days. But let's make sure that we're getting out there and being active about that. A couple things. If you have a number 1 pick, you can trade your number 1 pick for talent. That number 1 pick typically values out at around 20 fantasy points per game. And that's a big number. So feel free to utilize that to either improve your depth or go after a stud. The other thing is you look at these teams like Elmer and Mason, even Dobson, but mostly Elmer and Mason. You look at those teams, they're going to be throwing back some key players. So getting a number one pick is going to be an additional number one pick is going to be really, really beneficial to your future endeavors. I want you to think about that as well. And if you don't have a number one pick, great. Think about trading for one, I mean, there's a lot of value in that, but there's also the opportunity to flatten out your team right now. If you were to look at it, we have two high ceiling teams, decent depth teams. That's Mason and Elmer. Obviously, they're the top 2 scoring teams in the league. However, we also have a lot of good mix of depth teams in there in Dobson and Swenson and Aaron, some good depth teams, although Aaron is more ceiling than depth. So you have to think about which direction you want to go from a fantasy basketball standpoint. Do you want to continue to increase that depth, or do you want to get that ceiling high? Another thing to think about, and some owners have done this already, so you're already behind if you haven't done this. You got to look at the NBA schedules by games played down the stretch, because those final 3 weeks of the season, if we play all the way out, those final 3 weeks of the season, weeks 23, 24, and 25, they're out there for you to look at and understand, okay, all right, this is how many games are being played. I made a trade specifically to get more games played out of my bench. So if you're not doing that already, then you're behind. So it's time to start looking at those things. I'm Joe Swenson. I'm the commissioner of BrewSports Basketball, and I'm out.